All right, welcome everybody to the iced over edition of Legal Tech Week. It seems like not too many sections of the country aren't getting iced over right now, although I guess California's doing okay. But this is the show where we talk about the top stories in legal tech and innovation for the week. I'm Bob Ambrogi. I write the blog Law Sites and have the podcast Law Next. And we've got a smallish panel today. Some of our usuals are off in other directions. So let's just do some quick introductions here. Victor, you want to kick it off?
Sure. My name is Victor Lee. I'm Assistant Managing Editor for the ABA Journal, covering business of law and technology. And I am in sunny, breezy Chicago, where it was -1 this morning, but I think they said it was like -10 with wind chill, which actually is not as bad as I thought it was going to be. So I'm actually quite thankful for that.
And great. And Nikki.
Niki Black. I am with my case, and I write columns for ABA Journal, Above the Law, the Daily Record, and sometimes other outlets. And I also oversee and write the benchmark reports, the Law Pay in My Case benchmark reports, and the Law Pay in My Case legal industry report. And I'm coming at you from warm and breezy upstate New York, where I just checked before we all went live, and it's -18 with wind chill here. So nice and warm and balmy here.
And for the weather report from New York, Joe Patrice.
It's cold. It is very cold and very windy here in what I would consider upstate New York, but Nikki would not. To the extent, I mean, upstate New York starts at about 14th Street in my mind, so I qualify. Yeah, I'm Joe Patrice from Above the Law and the Thinking Like a Lawyer podcast, and I am, bracing for a cold eve.
I feel like we should all ask ChatGPT what the weather is, just so we can see how bizarre the answers are that it gives us in return. Hasn't been a good week for ChatGPT necessarily. I mean, after all the initial excitement about it, it's starting to show some of its flaws and hallucinatory fantasies are coming out of it. Maybe that's a good place to start because you wrote about some of those hallucinations, Joe, this week. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. And well, let's, in the interest of keeping things light and fun, well, not light and fun, I guess, but keeping things with a positive framework before we go to the negative framework. One story that I wrote about this week was that Ironclad announces that they are going to have some ChatGPT technology is going to be embedded within their kind of AI assist that they have, which I watched some of the videos of this in action, and it's super cool. It allows you to type in, what you want the contract to have, like type in an open-ended, let's have all of these, let's have a bunch of mutual confidentiality provisions, and it will instantly redline up the thing so that you can just click right through all the changes and make sure it's right. That's awesome. That is what ChatGPT can possibly do for the legal world in a good way. That said, I've been more down on it than some people as a technology, because while I think it's kind of cool, a lot of folks talking about how it's going to replace writing briefs and stuff like that. I don't know. I feel like, and this is a phrase that we all kind of use, but the garbage in, garbage out problem is getting glossed over a lot when we talk about ChatGPT. And a good example of this is SCOTUS blog decided to test ChatGPT with some basic legal questions, and the results were less than inspiring. It turns out that Clarence Thomas was a proud defender of gay rights, and Ruth Bader Ginsburg fought tooth and nail to keep same-sex marriage illegal. But that's what's going to happen. And I guess my real, between the two stories, my real theme was this technology is very interesting. It has some potential to do some cool things. It is not magic beans by itself. And it really gets, the way to integrate it into something that works well is where you can pair it with a data set that is tested and vetted and good. When it spits out something that Ironclad has already deemed appropriate and legal officers have deemed good language, then that's great. when it's searching the internet for an answer and it's spitting out that Clarence Thomas was on top of that decision, then it's not good. And that was kind of my theme of the week.
Yeah, that's all good. I had sort of good and bad also, I guess, this week in terms of ChatGPT. I mean, so I saw the Ironclad thing, which I thought was really cool, actually, and that's, that seems like there's a great solid example of how you can use GPT in a productive and practical way. There was also another one that I wrote about this week. You guys may have covered it too, on docket alarm using GPT basically to show you summaries of litigation filings as you're going through a docket sheet. I mean, you know how it is, you're reviewing, say you're on Pacer or whatever, well, not on Pacer, you'd be on docket alarm. But I mean, when you're reviewing a docket sheet from the federal courts or from state courts, you'll see this long list of complaint filed or maybe motion filed with all these exhibits attached to it. It'll say Exhibit 1, Exhibit 2, Exhibit 3, and they're all PDFs that you have to click on the PDF and download it and read it to see what it says. There's no way to just quickly get a sense of what it is. So one thing GPT does really well is summarize, create summaries. And so what they did, Michael Sander, founder of Docket Alarm, just set up this integration with GPT so that now when you hover over one of those little links, a little summary pops up of what's in the document. GPT is just jumping in and reading the PDF and creating a summary of it, which is pretty cool. It's not perfect. It's still in beta for them and still got some kinks that you can't necessarily rely on the summary as a totally accurate statement of what's in there. But it's kind of cool.
Well, I think it's super.
No, Maureen,
Sorry.
I'm not really somewhere wrong. Yeah, go ahead. I was going to say the one other bad thing, though, just that happened this week was another sort of example of the hallucinatory tendencies of GPT is I wrote about another new product, another new use of GPT, and in which the screenshot they gave me of it doing answering a legal question, I didn't even notice until Pablo Arredondo from Casetext pointed this out to me. It was made up law. It was it quoted a section from a statute that is not what the statute says. So, and even the developer of the product he's the one who gave me the screenshot and hadn't noticed that. So, got those hallucination issues.
Well, what it reminds me of, I've seen it described one way, and I see it a different way. One way that I saw it described, someone mentioned on Facebook, mansplaining at its best. Like it's like someone who doesn't quite know what they're talking about, just kind of bullshitting, and it sounds really good. But for me, it almost feels like when you catch your 3-year-old just in a bald-faced lie, like it's so obvious they're lying, but they'll look at you with big eyes and make up a really believable fabrication about what just happened and stick to it, like they'll hold to it. And for me, it reminds me more of sort of that feeling when you're interacting with this AI. That being said, everyone's always afraid that AI is going to replace jobs and replace lawyers and replace everyone else. I don't think that's what's going to happen, at least not anytime in the near future, because you need someone with a foundational knowledge about the topic that's being discussed or being researched so that they can vet the response and take what they need from it and save a lot of time in the process, but still absolutely be able to call out that BS when they see it and delete it. And so like I found that I've used it in a bunch of ways, sometimes just like for an introductory sentence that I'm struggling with. It just sort of gives me the foundation to write it. But I've also noticed someone else who I will not name, just writing all their crap, clearly ChatGPT. Like if the voice is completely changes, this person had a very unique voice and it is gone. And it's the run-on sentences are gone. Like it's clearly ChatGPT is writing what they're saying, which is kind of annoying, especially when it's such a clear change of voice. So people definitely need to avoid doing that. But I think it's super interesting. And then the other thing that I'll just point out.
You're not going to tell us who that is? Come on.
I'm not going to slander anybody because I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure I'm right. but then the
Well,
other
it's not slander if you're right.
but
That's
I
right.
don't have I can't prove it. Like I don't know it to be
Truth
true.
is an absolute defense.
But the other thing is like that I stumbled upon, I wrote about this on LinkedIn, is I'm going to put it in the comments, but it's this Twitch thing where it's an AI. It's not ChatGPT, but it's an AI that has taken all the Seinfeld episodes and it just makes up Seinfeld episodes, and it's all these little weird avatars that are really wonky and walk funny, and it cuts between like them in one of the buildings, like one of the rooms in Seinfeld, to like Larry Sedenfelder, they give him some weird name, doing stand-up. And it's bizarre because none of it makes any sense because it doesn't understand the context. It doesn't understand the jokes. But the best part of it, in addition to just the bizarre discussions that these little characters have, is the running commentary. Like this, I get lost in watching this. It's hysterical, but it's a great example of like the good, the bad of AI. Like it's such a weird mashup of something we all know and love, but it has no context whatsoever. But then like the internet's tweaked it and has this running commentary that makes it even almost funnier than the actual show itself was. So I'll add
Yeah,
I'll put it in the comments.
it's called nothing. It's called Nothing Forever, and I have also been entranced by it. I watched it I put it on for like 10 seconds to see what it was like, and I found myself locked in for 5 minutes of completely unfunny nonsense as it tries to be funny, which is, yeah, it was crazy.
It's like the best and the worst of AI though, right? Like utopia, dystopia. This thing's like somewhere in the middle. I don't know what it is, but it's sort of what AI does.
Well, what was the article? I don't know if Joe wrote it, but I think it was on Above the Law, where it was just like they had ChatGPT take a law school final, it got like average of C+, I think, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So for a B student in law school, I kind of took offense to that, but whatever. But that's sort of where it is right now, right? I mean, it's sort of like it's at like a C+ level, maybe even in some cases it's C or D, or in some cases it's B-. But like but as more as it studies more, as it develops better habits, so to speak, learns more and that kind of stuff, then maybe eventually it'll get closer to like law review status, and then maybe it'll start writing law review articles too. But I mean, although I guess it already has in some cases. But yeah, I mean, I think the thing with ultimately it's still that question of sort of like you can have all the monkeys, right, with the monkeys typing on typewriters, right? Like they can create a 500-page novel, but it won't make any sense. And so it's sort of at that stage right now where it's like you have the capability to produce all this data, all this text, all this stuff, but it won't necessarily make sense to the people reading it, and it won't for a long time. And so, or maybe not too long, who knows? But because I think the thing I saw was that like somebody wrote Godfather 4 by using ChatGPT or something like that, but like it was so general and so like I think the characters' names were all like kind of weird, and like the plot was very kind of like generic stuff. Like they could have just taken like various pieces of fan fiction that they'd seen like across the internet and just kind of mashed it all together. So it's kind of like a little bit of this, a little bit of that. It's like Don Vincent does this, and then his wife is this, and blah blah blah. And it's and just reading it over, just kind of like, okay, it's not there yet, but who knows? Maybe with more time and more advances and more context, and it'll eventually get closer to where it's supposed to be. But yeah, I mean, I definitely sort of agree with Bob that like for very limited, and with Joe too, with very limited for very limited purposes, like it definitely serves a need now and can definitely be used for for things. But as to whether or not it's going to replace these things, no.
But hey, don't Mafia people always have weird names? I mean, like the ones I know are all named like Meatball or Skyball or things like that.
Oh no, what was on the Simpsons? My favorite one was Jimmy the Squealer, because he would just talk all the time. And I'm just like, well, if you hadn't named him Jimmy the Squealer, you probably wouldn't be talking to the cops right now. But
Right. Yeah, I mean, things are getting interesting. Now with Microsoft saying that it's going to be integrated into Office and Teams and Bing Search. I think Mark Palmer pointed that out in the chat.
Google too. February 8th, they're rolling out their version.
Their version, but not OpenAI's product, but their own product. and that'll be interesting. But I think that the important point about all these sort of hallucinatory effects of ChatGPT is that this is all using the the untrained essentially version. Well, it's not untrained, but it's not trained on legal materials. It's the version that's just trained against the world at large, Reddit or whatever. And as companies are able to start more directly fine tuning and training this technology against legal data, legal specific data, then a lot of these hallucinations, I would suspect, are going to disappear. I think, anyway. So let's see. What else should we talk about this week? Actually, I'll bring up one of mine just because I thought it was kind of interesting. Of Clio launching in Australia. So Clio, the practice management platform, we all know what Clio is, announced that it's launching not just its product, but opening an office in Australia. And that will then be kind of its base for expanding throughout the Asia Pacific region. And I mean that's interesting in and of itself, not all that surprising because we know Clio's got a lot of money and wants to continue to expand. I do think the interesting thing there, though, is it could make for an interesting competition war because Australia has kind of long been the domain, if you will, of Leap. One of the practice management software that started there 20 something years ago, and that is part of this kind of odd empire that owns InfoTrack and Smokeball and other products that are out there on the market. And so there will be an interesting, I think, competition war heating up in Australia over the next year. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out as Clio tries to get a foothold there. I don't know. Is my case moving to Australia too, Niki, or?
No, we don't have any plans right now. You're gonna ask me about the company direction of a FinPay? No comment, I guess. But
yeah, all right. I mean, Leap. Somebody mentioned why. I'm not sure why it hasn't made a greater impact. But Leap is got a huge impact in Australia. I mean, it is the leading practice management platform in Australia. I always think. I mean, they kind of started out in the U.S. having a weird strategy, I think, for expanding in the U.S. I always thought because they were doing it on a state by state basis, and they had a good reason for that, which was that they were trying to, they had a lot of sort of customization built into the platform that was state specific, so that forms and whatever document automations, that sort of thing, are built into the platform are tailored to the state that they're operating in. So they kind of launched in like Massachusetts, I don't know, a handful of states originally. And then I think about a year ago, I think they decided that it made more sense to try and expand more nationally across the United States. But they're still, they still, I don't think they've really taken a leading role sort of among the practice management contenders. I don't know, somebody else might disagree with that, but they do have, they also, InfoTrack is here, and InfoTrack owns like the Legal Talk Network, bought them last year, and owns the Law Toolbox and a few other products out there in the U.S. and Smokeball is in the U.S. as well, and it's also one of the up there in the top platforms. So. All right. What else should we talk about? Ethics, New York ethics.
yeah, I wrote about an opinion that was out of New York. I always, because I'm in New York, I like to follow the New York opinions. And this one,
that makes sense. You should do that.
Know what's going on. At first glance, this one struck me as I was reading it. Well, one thing that frustrates me, I just wrote about this on LinkedIn today too, is this was about YouTube and lawyer advertising and what constitutes advertising and what does not. And initially when I started reading it, I was annoyed because I feel like the ethics committees in general unnecessarily complicate the ethical issues as they relate to online interactions. And that from the very beginning, it's like this knee-jerk reaction. Oh no, it's new, it's crazy. We've got to like do this in-depth dive into all this weird stuff. And they've done this since the beginning. And it's always frustrated me because the online is just an extension of the offline. You can find offline interactions oftentimes that are very similar to whatever the online conduct you're talking about is. Take those opinions that address those offline conduct and apply the decisions from those opinions to the current issue. And oftentimes I feel like they really just need to be like, see this opinion and apply those. But that's not what they do. And instead, especially in the very beginning, they do these deep dives into all these weird, very specific things. And technology moves so fast that if you issue opinions about a very specific function of a particular type of technology, it's going to be moot before you even get the thing published. And my favorite example of this was when New York wrote about LinkedIn and specialties. Does anyone remember when there used to be a specialty section of LinkedIn bios? And the issue was, can lawyers put the practice areas under that specialty section? So someone asked the New York bar, and it takes months for it to for them to decide, have a committee, make their decision that they're going to write about it, do all the research, have a draft, spread it all around, everyone makes their comments, they all agree on a final one, they finally publish it. This is like 7 months after the initial inquiry. And in the meantime, in this particular case, LinkedIn removed that section from the bio, I'm sure in part because of all the complaints from lawyers about the ethical issues it presented, yet they still published the opinion and it was moot when they published it. So it's like, you got to issue these broad strokes if you're going to do stuff about tech, not these very narrow opinions. And so when I initially read the New York opinion and what it was about, I was annoyed because if you want to say something, Joe, I don't know.
Oh, no, I just thought you were done. I was going to shift it to a slightly off of your LinkedIn thing. But anyway, we'll get there.
Okay. So essentially what this opinion said was all the things I already say about blogging, right? Is it educational content? If it's purely educational content, you don't need a disclaimer. But if it is somehow promotional, you need a disclaimer, which seemed to me a stupid thing to issue an opinion about until I got to the very tail end and they raised a very good point, which doesn't surprise me because usually New York does a really good job with these things. And so what they said was, but you can embed LinkedIn videos into other content that is advertising, like a website or some other sort of site. And when you embed that video, it then can become considered attorney advertising, in which case you probably need to have a disclaimer in the video or under the description of the video. And so that was what made me decide that they actually should have issued an opinion when normally I think they shouldn't. And so I thought that was interesting and it was a very good point. And it was not, I can't think of an offline corollary off the top of my head that is similar, where you'd have some sort of conduct that somehow gets embedded in some other type of offline conduct where you need a disclaimer in that instance. I could be wrong, and I'd love it if someone else could think of it. But so I thought that was interesting.
Embedding is very online. It's hard for me to embed things offline. But one of the reason when you're mentioning that LinkedIn issue, I wrote a story recently and I put it in the chat for the people who are following along live. That was really interesting because some of these ethical, not New York, but this was about, I think it was like New Jersey or something, but they had an ethics opinion that was technically allowed this, but was vague enough that it created some concern. Yeah, in a lot of ways, these you can't tout specialties rules tend to impact lawyers of color more than white lawyers. And part of the argument is that given, a lot of the built-in structural reasons why white lawyers have advantages, a lot of lawyers of color and women need to win like those 40 best lawyers in Philly kind of things in order to, generate business. And obviously pay to play ones are bad, and those should be lawyer advertising. But if you're acknowledged by a non-pay to play site for getting that kind of acknowledgement, there's a chilling effect by some of these rules to putting it on your website. But it turns out that that's largely one of the ways in which folks in that position trying to get their businesses started, they rely on that.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought of it that way. It never occurred to me that a particular segment of the lawyer population might benefit or rely upon that type of advertising or promotional content more than others. And that's an interesting twist on that.
Yeah, I hadn't either, actually, until some people started talking about this with me. And I was like, never thought about it. But yeah, so I put this up a while back.
Your back and forth on the YouTube video ethics opinion, though, makes me think of Joe's post about the SCOTUS questioning of ChatGPT, where it says, did Ruth Bader Ginsburg dissent in Obergefell? Yes, she dissented. Well, who were the justices in the majority? She was in the majority. Well, didn't you just say she dissented? I apologize. She dissented. Yeah.
Well, so who was the majority? And they go, I apologize. It was Clarence Thomas.
At least it has manners.
I was going to say, at least it's polite.
Yeah.
I mean, so a few years ago, I can't remember, what was the event we had in Vancouver? It was at ABA, or was the ABA mid-year or something? We were in Vancouver, and I was very like, look, we all acknowledge that Canadians are more polite than we are, but I never really realized it until I saw a bus that was out of service, and instead of just saying out of service, it said out of service, then blinked off and said sorry. And I was like, you don't have to apologize, bus. It's okay.
Yeah, New York would have been like, out of service.
Yeah.
Probably with an expletive following it.
Yeah.
For New York City.
Frickin' out of service.
Us is swearing
Out of
at
service. Sorry. Or sorry, however they say it up there.
My favorite
yeah.
Canadian story has nothing to do with legal tech, but my family went to a conference and a Muse concert with my kids, and the concert started when Muse came out, and you could look around the entire place and see the few Americans, because we all jumped up and started screaming, and all the Canadians were going, and we were like, what is happening here? And you looked at the floor, and there were like little pockets of people flinging themselves around. The rest of them were just standing there. And it was the most bizarre concert, because they don't interact quite the same way we do at a rock concert. It was sort of surreal. And I think it had to do with kind of being polite to the people around you, but it was a very different experience. And it was, I don't know if I'd go back for a concert. It removed a lot of the fun.
Well, something else that happened this week, it has nothing to do with concerts in Canada, but is the Thomson Reuters Institute put out their report on ALSPs, which they do, every 2 years, I guess now.
Mhm.
And Victor, I know the ABA Journal covered it. Joe, I think you covered it too. I mean, I got a chance to read it myself. I wish I had, because it's a fascinating topic. But Victor, can you what was kind of the headline out of it?
I mean, just that, they're doing really well. The market is up to, I think they said 20.6 billion to 20.6 billion, not 26 billion, 20.6 billion. It is up 45% since the last report in 2021, which that was what kind of caught my eye. I was like, wow. I mean, thinking about all the times we talk about like all the money going in and all of the the big the big the serious fundings and stuff like that. I guess it makes sense just because clearly there's investments in this area, and it's clearly growing. So but yeah, just they said that one of the other things I thought was interesting was that they said that there are a lot of, they talked about sort of like the law firms, the growing number of law firms that either have their own sort of captive ALSP. Sorry, I tend to have trouble with these acronyms. I tend to like kind of.
I do too. I always get that one back.
Yeah.
Because it's a bad acronym.
It is, right?
We should have a better acronym for this.
I actually keep calling GPT GTP for some reason.
No, you know which one really messed me up? The in Washington with the the I'm gonna mess it up now. The triple LT.
Oh, the triple LTs, yeah.
Yeah, because I was L triple T, which I almost did just now. But no, it's actually triple LT, which doesn't really, but yeah. So but they talked about sort of the captive ALSP, where like a firm will have its own in-house in-house provider that'll detect for them and whatnot, and how that's a growing part of the law firm model as well. And we talked about that on the show as well. And it's just interesting. It's just interesting to kind of look at this and kind of just the numbers, like from Thomson Reuters, just that they're really growing, and that it's really seems like it's a huge part of the market now, and that I think they anticipate that it's going to keep going up like in the years to come. So it'll be interesting to see what the report says in 2 years. But yeah, it was just the numbers were just really kind of. I mean, I think they weren't surprising because I think we've seen some of it, but just seeing it kind of committed to paper and like, or I guess on screen really not. Nobody reads on paper anymore, right? Just on screen was just kind of eye catching for me.
Yeah, Joe, you wrote about it too. Do you have anything?
I did. I mean, the thing that was kind of interesting to me was that the captive ALSPs are doing a really good job, and that the big four hasn't been taking up as much. It was a smaller segment of that, which I thought was interesting after years of us all. I think it's been a fairly consistent drumbeat of the big four is about to destroy everybody, and it seems like they just haven't gotten over the hump for whatever reason. But maybe that part of that is conflicts. They don't want to get over the hump. They think that the accounting business is too important to jeopardize this way, yada, yada. But yeah, it was interesting that they were, for all the resources they have globally, they weren't the ones winning this race right now.
It's sort of like on unrelated level. I think like when Arizona and Utah, like, or I guess more Arizona than Utah, but when they open up their markets and whatnot, I think I certainly thought, and I'm sure many people thought that, oh, well, this just means that like this just put out the red carpet for like your PricewaterhouseCoopers and your KPMGs just come in and just start doing their thing, but like they haven't done it yet. So it's kind of like, yeah, I don't know if like what Joe said, sort of like maybe they took a look at it and they were like, it's not worth it, or we're not there yet, or this isn't really a market that's that important to us yet, but. Yeah, who knows? I mean, I think they're still kind of the sleeping giant that a lot of people are sort of expecting will one day wake up, but I guess maybe it's comfortable just being asleep for now.
Yeah. Although I think that's true. I mean, all of that I pointed out before, but I mean, all of that is all in the big firm world and all in the corporate world, and not a sleeping giant with respect to smaller businesses or all of the individual consumer legal issues out there that still aren't getting addressed.
True. Although I mean, I view the ALSP market as largely those big organizations, right? Like it's bread and butter is that organization that has 3 bazillion terabytes worth of data that has to be searched. And I'm like, right. And yet they still would prefer to walk over to an independent who's been in this business or a captive than to one of the big ones. Interesting.
Yeah. So another sort of a weird thing that happened this week, I think. I don't know how long have we been doing this show? We've been doing it for a while now, and I don't know, maybe once ever we've like talked about a rebranding of a company, and then suddenly this week there were 3 rebrandings of legal tech companies. I wrote about one kicking the week off, where Documate rebranded as Gavel. And I mean, the reason they did that was really because they were, and actually for Documate, that was their second rebranding. They started under a different name entirely, but Documate suggested document automation, but they've kind of evolved beyond that into more productization, where law firms and even legal tech companies like Hello Divorce are using the Documate platform to productize the delivery of legal services. So they expanded. They rebranded in that way. And then just today, I wrote about time by ping, which is an automated timekeeping application. And it rebranded earlier this week as Laurel, like the wreath. And the reason for their rebranding was because they're expanding into other verticals. Although I don't know how time by ping necessarily would have limited that. Maybe they just didn't like the name. But they're expanding into other verticals and going to be more in the broader professional services market. And I always like to point out that Time by Ping was the winner of the very first year of the Startup Alley at ABA Tech Show. And today is the last day to vote for the next crop of companies that'll be at ABA Tech Show. But then I completely missed, and Mark Lawrence had pointed out to me on Twitter that Abacus Next also rebranded this week and has a new name called Carrot.
How do you pronounce
C-A-R-
that? Is it carrot or carrots? Like, I feel like carrots that you eat are pronounced different slightly than like a diamond carrot, a carrot for diamonds. Or do you think it's pronounced the same?
Carrot? I think it's carrot. That's a good question.
Yeah, I was
That's
struggling.
always a bad thing if you've got a brand name that people don't know how to pronounce, I guess. But they are the parent company of a whole bunch of different things: Hot Docs and Abacus Law and Zola Suite and whatever else they have. I don't know, something in the water this week in terms of legal tech companies all wanting to rebrand. And maybe we'll hear of more of them coming down the pike.
Yeah, I think Do Not Pay might come up with a new name immediately. That might be on there. They might be asking ChatGPT for one right now.
Poor Do Not Pay. In more troubles this week.
Yeah.
The whole thing about
Like,
he
Well,
said
we
he was
knew
going
it
to
was a
give
bad
money to
idea.
charity. Did you see the thing about how he said he was going to give what it was donate $10 to charity every time somebody did something? I don't even remember what it was, and then looked like possibly he was forging his donation receipts.
Yeah.
I didn't
He
hear
was
that.
saying that he'd done it in the past, basically, and they looked at the receipt that he posted. It's like, wait a minute, that receipt was from yesterday. Yeah, it's not good. Which, look, I wrote a piece. I wasn't available last week because I was at the debate tournament that I was at, and so I wasn't able to join. But I did listen in for a couple of minutes as just kind of a hiding it as a listener. And while you were talking about the Do Not Pay issue, and like I'd written a story that week that focused on, I actually didn't have a problem with Do Not Pay arguing a traffic case. I mean, I've been to traffic court. There's not a lot of complexity there. But my issue was obviously hiding it from the judge was a problem, right? Like that's a problem.
Right.
Doing things like if you think that the rules are against you, you lobby to change the rules. You don't say screw the rules. Like I agree with all that. But my take last week, since I wasn't here, I'll air it now. My take was I thought that lawyers were getting a little too high horsey about like, oh, good, he needs to come up and lawyers we need real lawyers. You can't have technology here, which read to me a lot more like technology is all well and good so long as we get to still be the gatekeepers of it, which bothered me a bit. And not that I was defending it, but yeah.
There was a little confusion because some of us, I think, were talking about the offer to have someone argue in front of the Supreme Court, and others of us were talking about the traffic tickets. So the arguments only applied to like mine, like the ethics and malpractice really applied more to in front of the Supreme Court than a traffic ticket. But it was
and what's weird, oh no, definitely, and a lot of people were going both ways. That's definitely true. I actually kind of thought that the Supreme Court one, like it was just an impossibility, so I didn't really think about it. I actually reached out to them and didn't hear back because immediately happened afterwards. But I actually reached out and was like, maybe would you be willing to set up a thing where we like get a moot court set up? Like you're not going to be in front of the Supreme Court, but if you're willing to put up money for the Supreme Court, maybe you could put like 15 grand to an open bar tab and we can get a room somewhere and get some professors and judges and see what it does. But yeah, obviously their PR issues became bigger very quickly.
Yeah, even that traffic ticket thing. I mean, why not try and find a friendly judge to do the experiment with? I mean, a judge who would be open to it,
Mhm.
Scott Schlegel or somebody like that, maybe who might be willing to experiment a little bit.
He's on record that he was against it, but yes, somebody
I
like
don't
that.
know. I mean, set up a test rather than try and do it on the sly. I just didn't get that, but
Or just do it, or just do it with like Judge Judy or something, or whoever replaced Judge Judy.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, like do like some people's court thing, like on, or you know, where you know, Judge Reinhold or something, you know, like where you, yeah, it's just, you know, where you have a controlled setting that's not like in court, and you're not smuggling something in that you're not supposed to have, and using technology on, you know, on the sly.
Or
Yeah.
even a law school moot court. Like
Yeah.
forget setting up a fake one, just go into the law schools. They've got them all over the place. You know as well.
Well, I mean, I was very much like, you can get some moot court, you can get some law students maybe to be involved. You could get a couple of professors who deal with these sorts of issues. You could get a practitioner or two who's been in front of the Supreme Court. I mean, I could call a couple that I think would be willing to do it. Like, let's just have it. But yeah, it kind of fell apart on that front.
Meanwhile, when does the movie come out of
Spectacularly.
Catherine Tewson?
Yeah. By the way, let's take a second. That talk about like pissing off exactly the wrong person. Catherine Tewson's just like, every day is another nail in that coffin.
She is dogged. She is dogged.
Yeah.
But yeah, be nice to Catherine Tewson. Um, what else? That's all I had. What else do we have? Anything else anybody wants to talk about?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like we should come up with something else, but I just haven't. I don't know. Yeah, like what do we got here?
What else
Trying
did
to
I talk
think.
about? This is uh, let's see. I talked about.
Ooh, wait,
Well,
we've
I
got
will
an
say-
answer
I will
on how to
say-
pronounce
I had-
carrot.
oh, good. I have something
It's-
on Twitter. Let me look at while you're.
It's pronounced like the typographical symbol, which is carrot,
Okay.
because that's how you spell it in the typographical sense, which I guess I probably knew, but I never really would have thought of. So that's interesting.
Yeah. We could
Oh,
talk
I-
about theory and principle rebrand, not rebranding, but relaunching this new, not launching, not relaunching. Theory and
Yeah.
Principle had their 5th anniversary, and they're launching a new business, T&P Studio, where they're going to be for 5 years. They've been building tech for other people. Now they're going to start building products for themselves or in partnership with other companies. If you've got an idea for a tech product, but maybe you don't have the developers, the engineering folks, or maybe you don't have the budget for it, or whatever else, you can partner with Theory and Principle and go to market together with a product.
So you think if you have you think you have a theory, but you're not sure if it works in principle, you can, I don't know, that doesn't really work, but
It sort of works. Yeah, it sort of works. Yeah, that's good.
I saw an interesting case in it was ChatGPT, but where like a Colombian judge used it to ascertain whether the defendant or no, whether someone who was autistic fell within some sort of, I can't remember. It was
oh wow.
basically they used it on the bench, is what was interesting. To in a medical rights case in Colombia to determine if a boy diagnosed with autism was exempt from paying medical costs. So I thought it was interesting just that the judge used it to look up a very specific legal issue that I definitely feel like ChatGPT would get wrong. Like I would not rely on its response. So I thought that was an interesting use case. I put it in the chat.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess one other thing I would mention, Caroline is not here. Oh, I'm sorry. What, were you going to say something about that?
No, go for it.
Well, I was going to say Caroline is not here this week, but
No kidding.
I encourage. Well, no.
Is it a week that ends in a day with Y? Yeah, go on.
That's not what I was pointing out. But if you hadn't seen her, we've talked a lot about Rain in Court, what happened with Rain in Court. She had a in-depth conversation with Rain in Court founder, CEO Andy Klein. You know, as everybody knows, Rain in Court laid off most of its staff, scaled back dramatically in terms of its support for the platform it was operating. And so everybody's been wondering, is this the end of Rain in Court? What's going on with Rain in Court? And Caroline had a really interesting conversation with Andy that maybe answers some of those questions, or tries to at least get Andy's thoughts on the answers to some of those questions. So encourage you. There's the link in the chat if anybody wants to follow up on that. Maybe we can get Caroline here next week to talk about that. All right. Was there something else, Joe, that I cut you off on? No, you're all set.
No, I mean, like, whatever. I was just
Whatever.
yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of something, because we are, about, 8 or 9 minutes short of what we usually work for. So I'm like trying to come up with something, but
I know it. For
yeah.
what I pay you guys, it should be.
I have one that relates to it's another one
good.
I posted on Twitter. It's less legal tech, and it's just more lowering the bar, the blog that always posts really funny things. A judge
Yes.
said the F word no longer has sufficient shock value to be a problem at work. I thought that was a nice conclusion, and it's now that we all know that, we can just swear with abandon. So I just thought that was a good thing for everyone to be aware of, so that we can just drop the F-bomb all over the place on this show, because this is kind of work, right?
You're welcome here. You're welcome here. You can use whatever words you want here.
Yeah. I mean, that was my big story last week, was the law professor saying the F-bomb under his breath about a student request.
Do you know what I saw? That she said that he had a comb over right before.
So, what's interesting is some people have heard that, some people didn't. I didn't necessarily hear that, but I've definitely gotten responses from people saying like, well, she insulted him immediately after. And I was like, put aside whether or not that excuses, like, whether or not you do anything there. Also, like, what a weird response. If that was what he heard, why isn't he being more like, wait a minute, what did you say? Like, that's how I would react if I were in that situation. Not that I have a comb over ish, but like, it seems like if that was what he even heard, he would have been more. Anyway, whatever. He's apologized. I think rightly so. I thought that I actually took the stance that the request was a little unreasonable, especially in an era where we videotape things. However, his response to it needed to be more open and much more oriented towards making sure people learn the material, yada, yada, yada. So yeah, that was my take on that.
Yeah. We do have conference season coming up. Oh, go ahead, Victor.
Which season?
As someone who, at staff meetings will often drop the F-bomb for emphasis on certain words, this is welcome news for me. So I am actually quite pleased about this. But I do kind of feel like sometimes when I do say it in certain circumstances, it still does land without quite the intent that I was hoping for. So I guess there's still, I can also see the argument that maybe this doesn't quite open the floodgates for me to, do my Andrew Dice Clay impersonation at meetings. But
I mean, my takeaway on it, I definitely felt like it was one of the few things that crosses over that line into me realizing, am I going to start saying things like the problem with kids these days? But what I thought was the problem with kids these days is the issue was, especially because there were a lot of international students in the class, was that the way in which he was teaching the course, they felt was excluding people on basis of national origin from learning the material, which is a serious complaint and a valid one. And then a lot of the conversation about it was he used an F word. And I was like, yeah, we should be nicer to people, but come the F on. Like, you've got to realize, like you're going into law, like that's going to happen. And it was a lesson. Like, I thought the lesson to young lawyers is that sometimes every argument, it doesn't need to be in your brief for a good reason, because that one made the more important argument look less important. It looked more frivolous. Like, yes, it was valuable as a catch that was happening, but like the real argument was he's not open to change, not that he gets frustrated and uses what every client is going to say to you forever and ever. But whatever.
Yeah, the only thing I was going to say is we do have, it's going to be a busy couple of months coming up with legal tech conferences on the agenda. We're just 3 weeks away from ABA Tech Show this month.
I need to get my passes for that.
Yeah, you know what? It just
I've
occurred to me.
done
I've
it.
never registered. I haven't registered for ABA Tech Show, and
Yeah, I
I'm
got
like
to as well.
leading the
Yeah,
Startup
I'm
Alley
actually,
thing, and I haven't.
yeah, I need to get my pass as well, and I'm, going to be there.
I
So
have no hotel and no travel arrangements, nothing. I've been so focused. The Startup Alley has been like a beast this year. It's like we had a lot of applications, and just it's been crazy. Um, and then Joe and I are going to be in Salt Lake City in a couple of weeks. We're going to be spending Super Bowl Sunday. And are you going to be there for the Super Bowl, Joe, or are you coming in later? You going to Filevine? Joe froze. Did Joe freeze? I think Joe froze.
He's frozen.
Either that or he's really
Lost him.
stumped.
But the fire's not moving in the background.
Oh, okay. All right. But he and I are going to a conference in Salt Lake City in a couple of weeks, Filevine, and then Legal Week coming up not long after that. So it's going to be an interesting couple of months going forward.
Busy.
All right. Well, he died. Hopefully his power didn't go out where he is. Well, I hope everybody is able to stay warm. Dan, you're going to Filevine, and has a good weekend, and we'll see some of you back here next week. Not sure who. Niki, you said you might not be back next week, but
Have another Austin trip, going back to the home office again.
busy person.
Be in the air. Yeah.
All
Lot of
right.
trips to Austin. Not a bad place to go, except for this week.
All right.
Bad weather. All right.
All right. Well, stay warm, everybody. Have a good weekend, and we'll see you all next week.
Bye all.